Welcome to the Tippie Leads podcast, stories from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business that will change the way you work and lead. I'm your host, Nick Westergaard. I teach at Tippie and lead our Story Lab program. Each season of Tippie Leads, we focus on a grand challenge in today's changing world of work. This season, we're looking at how you can be the CEO of your life. This season on Tippie Leads, we've explored what it means to be the CEO of your life. We've covered everything from vision and habits to auditing your time to mastering self-leadership. But how do you move from just listening to a podcast to actually leading? That's what Nicole Johnston is here to help us with in our Season 4 finale. Nicole is a Tippie alum, a Tippie advisory board member, and a leadership coach who specializes in helping high performers take complex ideas and transform them into actionable plans. She's here to help us close the gap between theory and execution so that you can truly step into that role of being the CEO of your life. After that, we'll hear a story from Tippie student Keegan Schaeffner. Keegan shares how she learned to advocate for herself and find her voice in one of the most challenging places imaginable, her first job. And of course, we'll bring it all together one last time with a final Tip E just for you. Ready? Let's get started. Nicole, I am super excited to chat with you because after all of these episodes of this season of Tippie Leads, all about being the CEO of one's own life, I've found myself overwhelmed with all of this great advice. And I mean, it's a good problem to have, but it also leaves me struggling with where to start. And I always say in class, if someone has a question or an issue, I'm guessing that others do as well. And perhaps there are other listeners out there thinking, where do I start with being the CEO of my life? So I'm glad you're here to help us make sense of this.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from Amy Colbert's work on vision to Carolyn Reddick's application of managerial accounting to personal life. Your work as a leadership coach, how do you help merge those high-level concepts into something that's an actionable dashboard for life?
Well, let's start with the basics. And here's what I mean when I say that. 80% of New Year's resolutions fail within the first 10 days. And they fail because you have this very aspirational, big, giant, meaty goal, whether it's I'm going to run a marathon or I'm going to lose 50 pounds or I'm going to do whatever. And becoming the CEO of your own life is that big, giant, aspirational goal that you're going, holy shnikes, I have no idea how to get there. So the way you get there is by turning things into very small, actionable steps. So like, hey, you say your New Year's goal is to run a marathon. The first thing you're going to go do is not going to be run 10 miles for training. The first thing you're going to do is say, do I have shoes I can run in? If you're a woman, maybe do I have a quality sports bra that I can be running in? Is it going to be actually thinking about the things you have to have before you take a first step? And if you go in your closet and you dust off a pair of running shoes and went, oh my gosh, I do have these. Yay, step one. That is much more actionable than I'm going to run a marathon. So when it comes to being the CEO of your own life, that's a lot. Start small. Start with something that is absolutely in your control. Maybe it is your calendar. The first thing you're going to do is book time for lunch every day. That's a big idea. Feeding yourself, giving yourself nutrition, self-care. Hey, there's a place to start. You are exerting control over something that you own, you are accountable for, and the first day when you have lunch and you think, oh my gosh, this day is better, celebrate that. But you have to start small because it's so easy to get overwhelmed with these big, lofty things versus recognizing that there's very manageable, bite-sized pieces that will put you on that necessary path that when you reflect back in 6 months or a year, you can go, oh my gosh, I am the CEO of my own life. But you can get there through these very small, actionable steps that you celebrate versus just looking at this overwhelming goal that you just can't make heads or tails of.
In any of our prep work, did I tell you that my goal for the year is running a marathon?
Oh no, you didn't.
Oh wow, geez, because I thought I know Nicole has a lot of talent. She's a mind reader also. So, but that's just your go-to example.
It is
So
my go-to example because it's one that a lot of people pick, which I think you guys are all sadistic, but it's all good.
well, I'm excited and yeah, it's slowly working the miles up, and I've been at it for a couple months, and it's not till October, so I've got that time to continue that process.
Are you doing the Chicago Marathon?
I am not. I'm
Oh,
doing the Twin Cities Marathon
excellent.
that you run from Minneapolis to St. Paul. So
Oh, fun. That'll be great.
yeah, I'm excited. So in talking about planning, training, calendars. I one thing that of all of the different thoughts bubbling up after this season, I think about Michelle Williams talking about saying no,
Mhm.
and I feel like she mentioned whether it's Iowa nice. I think we think that we own that, but I'm here to tell you they say the same thing in Wisconsin and Minnesota also. But I think sometimes that Iowa nice keeps us from maybe you talked about scheduling lunch, but it can end up almost that far because we don't say no.
Mhm.
So as we think about that, how can we set up some action triggers to implementing some more strategic no's?
Let's start with considering what matters. I remember this was literally 20, 25 years ago. I was at a meeting at Procter and Gamble, and at the time it was Susan Arnold was our chief operating officer, and she was talking to the women's group. And she said, "My most finite resource is time. That is what I guard the most fiercely, and that is what I have to make the most choices around. And the way I make choices is I determine where I add value. I do not have a green thumb. If I have to take care of any plant, it will die. Therefore, I will pay someone to take care of my yard." Now, I recognize as the chief operating officer of a Fortune 50 company or Fortune 5 company at the time, she might have a little more disposable income than I do, but the sentiment still holds. And so she said, I pay for people to do my yard. Do I think that I add any value to my family cleaning a toilet bowl? No, I do not. I pay for someone to clean my house. Do I think I add value going to a parent teacher conference for one of my children? 100% yes, I do. So in my life, I am very rigid about where I will commit my most valuable resource, which is time. So Susan went on to give many more examples, but it made me start thinking about what are the things that I'm giving time to that either I hate doing or I have no skill at, like the black thumb of gardening, or I'm just showing up because I'm being, shall we say, upper Midwest nice, since Iowa doesn't have
There
the
we
claim
go.
on
There we go.
it. Yes. And so what am I doing because it's just easier than having a boundary? And part of that, when the mind shift that happened is when I recognized when I was saying yes to things to be nice, I had to start critically identifying the opportunity cost of that yes. Did it mean I was missing dinner with my family? Did it mean that I was not able to finish some of my work on time? Did it mean that I missed out on going to a concert, an event, or whatever, because I was choosing to be nice instead of choosing to be where I mattered?
Yeah.
And so if you take that advice from Susan and really think through where you add value, where you don't, and what is the opportunity cost of saying yes, it will help you dramatically reframe where you should be and when you should be there. Because time is your most finite resource. And if you respect that resource, you're only going to invest it where you get payout.
That's a really good point, and it makes me think of, years ago, we were going on a long family vacation, and we were going to miss some lawn mowing, and nobody wants to be that person in the neighborhood who doesn't have their lawn taken care of. So I booked someone to come by and do it, and oh boy, that was maybe a decade, maybe 11 years ago. And I never stopped having them come.
Yeah,
And it's not that I didn't love doing it.
right?
And it took a big chunk out of my weekend, and with juggling different things, it's like, I don't want to be outside. I'd rather be or outside away from family when I'm working all
Right.
week, and I've got this. So, uh, and it kind of segue alert makes me think of another conversation. And this season, as we were looking at all of this and kind of planning all of this out, one thing I wondered, we were going to talk to someone in accounting about applying, managerial accounting to managing one's life. And I didn't know how that would go. But Carolyn did such a great job talking about the investor mindset and really what you're talking about with that valuable resource that you can't make more of your time.
Yeah.
And she talked about auditing one's time, and you kind of were getting close to mentioning something similar too. So what might an audit, I obviously like your Procter and Gamble mentor, was quick to outsource the lawn. But I've got a friend who loves taking care of the
Yeah.
lawn, and that means something to him. So how do you find that and do that audit?
Let's start with the most important thing, and it's the recognition of giving yourself permission to look at it.
Mm,
Because a lot of people don't want to do an audit because, ooh, I might learn something I don't like. I might find out something that's not great. But you have to start with giving yourself permission to do it. And then the second part is recognize what matters to me in my audit will not matter to anyone else in the same way. And so, for someone who loves spending time in the yard, that is their Zen moment, that they are just those people who can wave their wand and the plants grow, that is critical to that person. That is not me. And so, having the time that they need is very important to them in the yard. It's not important to me. It doesn't make it any less important to them or any more important to me. It means that we're different. So, giving ourselves permission to recognize that our audit is going to show things differently than everyone else. Now, I am sure that there are a lot of data science people who would love to do well, book it in 6-minute increments and tell us, blah, blah. No, no one's going to do that. Audit by starting with the points where you're just like, oh, really? I got to go do that again? Pay attention to that. Is it because it's a meeting that you, quote unquote, have to sit through, but you never get any value out of, you never add anything to it, but you have to sit through it? Is it an event that you're going to, that you're signed up for, that for some reason you keep going to it, even though you don't want to be there? Is it something for your church? Is it something for your kid's school? Is it something, whatever? But anytime you get that feeling, start there. Figure out if it can be something that can be outsourced, flat out declined, or if it's something that you have to continue to attend, how can you improve it? Because you want to get rid of that feeling and instead have it be something that you want to go to, you want to engage in, you want to invest in, whatever it is. But versus doing like trying to keep track of everything that you do for a week, start with that feeling in the pit of your stomach that goes, not again. Start there.
yeah, and even noticing that, and I love that you said, giving permission too. So, We just saw one another a couple of weeks ago. You're on the Tippie advisory board, and thank you for your hard work and advising there, and for meeting all of our listeners here again to advise some more. But there, we of course heard from Dean Amy Christoph Brown about the process of leading the Tippie of tomorrow. And on our episode just prior to this, we kind of talked about the challenge that is, okay, here are my day-to-day tasks. This is what I have to do right now to keep the trains running on time and everything else. And over there in the distance, that's what we're working on. And in our case, it's literally the building project. But I think that is a challenge for many leaders. Of, okay, here's the day to day, and I got to keep my eyes on that. But I also don't want to take my eye off of where we're going. What's your advice to leaders and individuals struggling with the juggling?
I think it probably goes back to one of the biggest myths that is around leadership. And that myth is that busyness equals productivity. And so there's so often where leaders feel like they have to be in on everything. They have to know what this is. They have to sit in on that meeting. They have to. No, you are a more effective leader when you have built such a phenomenal team that things only raise to you when they need your input or decision making. Because too often there's so many leaders who feel like they have to be involved in everything, which means that they're not doing anything strategic because they're spending all their time doing the Fred Flintstone car where you're just slapping the feet down trying to get ahead versus recognizing that there's other ways to do stuff. And so it's a hard thing for leaders because you have to have somewhat of an ego to be a leader, because you're not going to be up there and be humble all the time, because you can't do that in a leadership position. But standing up as a leader and saying, you don't need me, that's hard for some people's egos, but that's where you have to start.
That is I mean, again, making yourself almost invisible is scary, because it doesn't feel like what, all the way back to what you just said about what we think leadership should be.
Yeah.
We imagine it's supposed to look a certain way and have a flurry of activity around, but that's not always the case.
No, and in fact, the more activity you have, the less time you have for expansive, innovative thought. I mean, think about just with kids. That's one of the big challenges of giving kids screens all the time, is that they never have the time to be bored, because boredom drives innovation. Boredom drives creativity. And most leaders in companies are just big kids who have a screen in front of them all the time.
Well said. So I bonded over our mutual love of women's basketball, and here on the day that we're recording this, I believe the Indiana Fever is playing the Dallas Wings tonight.
Second preseason game.
There we go. And outside interests are important. And Alexandra Nika talked about that. She takes her the economics students through the Stanley Art Museum on campus and encourages folks to think outside of what she calls their discipline box. And for many, that could feel like, oh, that's not my direct objective. That's not on this to-do list that I'm methodically working through. As you're working on things like optimizing your time, like we've talked about with aligning a calendar, how do you find time for the things that maybe don't seem like they logically make sense, but are really important?
This is also going to go back to giving yourself permission, because you have to give yourself permission to not be busy all the time. You have to give yourself permission to do something other than what you quote unquote should. And you have to give yourself permission to keep doing it. So my challenge to any leader would be, where can you start saying no? And for example, when I got into my last company, I was because of my role, I was scheduled in all these meetings. And after like 2 months, I'm like, so why am I in these meetings? I feel like I'm missing something. They said, well, the person before you wanted to be in them. I said, so does this meeting change if I'm not in it? They said, no. And I said, okay, then I'm going to not come for the next month. I'm going to read the recaps, but I'm just going to not come for the next month. If you find that there is actually a role for me to play when I'm not there, tell me and we'll reassess. But otherwise, I'm going to take this time back. And they were a little uncomfortable, but they said, well, okay. So in that month that I was gone, what they found that we had overlooked was that there are certain contracts that I had to sign at my level that no one else could. They said this was the mechanism to talk about contracts. And I said, do we actually need to talk about the contract? They said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if the account owner and their boss is telling me, who I'm the boss of, to sign the contract, why would I question it? I understand that I have to sign it for financial officer reasons and everything,
Right.
but we never have a discussion about the contracts. You just tell me I have to sign it. Does this have to be a meeting? And they said, well, no, I guess not. I guess we can just say that, hey, this contract's coming, sign it. I'm like, okay, is there anything else in that meeting that I'm missing? They said, no, we don't think so. I said, okay, part 2. When you guys are having the meeting, what are you getting out of it? Well, we're just making everybody aware of it. Does everybody need to be aware of it? Or is this a nice to have? Because it was people talking about different accounts. I mean, that's nice to know, but it doesn't impact their direct business at all. And they said, well, I guess not. I guess it was just more informational. I said, would you like the time instead? And they said, can we do that? I'm like, absolutely, take the time instead. But because I was new, I could have the lens to be like, I don't get this. This doesn't make any sense to me. I could ask the questions. And because of my level, I could push back and say, let's do it a different way. And so when you take the time to do those kinds of discussions, you suddenly create time, your most finite resource, that you can then put in the places that matter. And it could be following Iowa women's basketball. It could be ballroom dancing. It could be scuba diving. It could be reading. It could be whatever you want. But if you haven't created time, it doesn't matter.
I'm Kira Ellerbrick. I am a student here at Tippie, a producer on the podcast, as well as a Story Lab peer mentor. So today, Nicole talked about the importance of giving permission to ourselves. And this is actually a really useful life skill. But for Tippie student Keegan Schaeffner, that life skill was learned behind the counter of a donut shop. In today's student story, Keegan shares a time where she gave herself permission to advocate for herself.
The year was 2021, and I was riding my extremely dorky electric scooter to work. And this wasn't any electric scooter. It was like if an electric scooter and a bike had a baby. It had a giant bike seat on it, big bike wheels, a bell on the front, and a basket on the back. So I was on my way to my very first job as a dishwasher for a donut shop. We weren't just any donut shop. We were located off a busy street in Chicago, right down an alley where we had a window that you would walk up to. And I know what you must be thinking. Working for a bakery, I must smell fantastic all the time, and it must just smell so good working there. It didn't, and I did not. I stunk so badly like grease every time I would leave that place. The first thing I did when I quit was throw away all of my work shirts because they smelled so bad. You know, along with being in an alley, alley-like activities still happened there. So I remember one morning when I rolled up on my electric scooter, I noticed that someone had pooped directly in front of our shop. Yeah. So I actually had to spend like 20 minutes before we opened trying to figure out how to get rid of that. Another thing that used to happen was whenever the garbage trucks would roll by, the entire place would reek like garbage when the windows would open. So I was working in the back of my grease and garbage smelling kitchen when my boss approached me one day and said, hey, do you want to learn how to decorate donuts? And I thought, absolutely. It was time for me to put down the smock and elbow-length gloves and pick up the piping bag. Or so I thought. So instead of doing that, I was both a dishwasher now and a donut decorator. Yeah. But that was okay. I was doing 2 jobs for the price of 1. A few months after my new promotion, the city of Chicago ended up changing minimum wage from $14 an hour to $16. However, we didn't count because we were such a small shop. But it gave me an idea. I thought, I'm going to ask my boss for a raise. You know, I think I deserve it. I've gotten some new responsibility over the last few months. I'm a good worker. Also, the worst thing you can say is no, right? So I talked to my boss, I set up a meeting, and I said, let's talk. I don't really remember being nervous about it, just because I thought I really, really deserved it. So obviously he was going to say yes. So the day came, I went to my boss's office, and I said, hey, can I have a raise? And he said, yeah, sure. So I did it, I got my raise, and it wasn't just $1 an hour, no. I got an extra $2 an hour. Yeah. I learned a lot from that first job and also from asking for my first raise. As my father likes to say, people aren't just going to hand things to you in life, you have to work hard for it, which is absolutely true. But another thing I learned was that outside of that, it's also really important to take accountability and speak up for yourself. Thank you.
Let's go back to our guest one last time for a final tip E for you to remember in your work.
The one thing that's meaningful to me is you get what you measure. And so as you're trying to make these changes, allow me to introduce you to the acronym PECK, P-E-C-K. And I want you to track when you're making choices. Have you given yourself permission to do something different? How is that choice and permission affecting your energy? Is it allowing you to create or grow new capabilities? And are you keeping your word? Because if you're truly being the CEO of your life, when you say to your 4-year-old son, yes, I'll be at your baseball game, you have to give yourself permission to leave work. You have to have the ability to show up, and you have to keep your word. If you're at work talking about whether or not we are going to keep having that meeting, you have to give yourself permission to ask that challenging question. Then you're going to have the energy of navigating and negotiating the changes that come with it. Is it going to create a new capability for you or someone on your team? And then did you follow through on it, or do you guys regress back to where you were? But the acronym PECK, permission, energy, capability, and keeping your word, pay attention to that. Because there's way too often these days where we're like, oh, of course, yeah, no problem. And we have no intention whatsoever of keeping our word. And that makes us much less valuable as leaders. But instead, if you commit, build the capability, and keep your word, you will be a shining star in every aspect of your life.
And that's a wrap on this episode and this season of Tippie Leads. Big thanks to Nicole Johnston for helping us bring all of these great ideas together and put them into action. Thanks to Keegan Schaeffner for sharing her story, and to Kira Ellerbrook for producing our Student Story segment this season. As always, big thanks to the Tippie Marketing Communication team for supporting the show. This season, we've explored what it means to be the CEO of your life from nearly every angle, from defining your vision to auditing your time. As you look back on your time spent listening to and watching these conversations with Tippie faculty and students, I hope that you have some new tools that you can use to lead with more clarity and purpose. I know I do. It's been a privilege to go on this journey with you. See you next season. This has been Tippie Leads, a podcast from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. To learn more about our faculty guests, their research, and more, go to tippie.uiowa.edu/Tippie Leads. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or coworker. Or better yet, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. On behalf of everyone at Tippie, thanks for listening, and go Hawks!